So now I will call to order our special meeting this evening. This is the 44th meeting of the 144th Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas. This is a special meeting on budgeting. So we will ask, are there any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Seeing none.
Your Worship, we'll now move into corporate governance and administration, where I understand that there is some introduction and some presentations happening by administration.
That is correct. So if we start with the Director of Finance, City Treasurer. No, we're going to start with Kevin. All right. Mr. Dielovec, you're up apparently.
Mayor, to members of council, I'd like to just give you a quick overview of the 2025 state of infrastructure for the city of St. Thomas. The city of St. Thomas maintains and operates about $2.15 billion worth of assets, categorized into three main categories. Water and sewer assets make up about 43% of that $2.15 billion. 33% are your streetscape assets, with the remainder being your facility type assets. And they're all broken down into subcategories a little bit further, as well as within the documentation you have as your part of your budget package. Of that $2.15 billion worth of assets, 83% of those assets are in good to very good condition. So that's really, really encouraging to see, with only 8% of those being in poor to very poor condition. And that 8% is making up your infrastructure backlog. The next slide is just simply all of those asset report cards that are in there for each of those subcategories provide you just a quick snapshot of what the value of that asset subcategory is. In this instance, I've chosen water mains. So water mains are worth $273 million throughout the city. The next little piece provides you what the condition is in 2025 of the asset and compares those to the Canadian average of other assets for that asset type of category. The condition trend is how we've been tracking. How has the city of St. Thomas been doing over the past few years? And below that is the historical funding levels that have been invested into renewing that particular asset category, and as well as what the 2025 request would be. And then the last little piece there is that infrastructure gap, which is what the backlog is. And the sum of all of those backlogs are put together in the summary table to basically identify there's $57 million worth of infrastructure backlog. That's your 8% of the $2.15 billion. And what the 2025 funding request is for capital investment of $29 million, and how that relates to the annual funding target balance, or variance, sorry. So we're a little bit shy. It's grown a little bit from last year, from just about $10 million to $11 million, but it also provides you the condition trend. So I'm seeing lots of green, lots of yellow, so that's a good sign. A little bit of red here and there, but that's not too bad for a pretty large portfolio. And that's just a quick snapshot of all of the asset management state of infrastructure for the city.
Have any questions of Kevin on assets? Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Worship. I'm not sure if this is part of this discussion right now, the last 2 pages in the budget, which includes the street construction forecast 2025 to 2034. Okay, I have some questions. Yep. Thanks. I called Kevin this afternoon too. Where I'm frustrated is Kevin was able to provide me today with a 2017 to 2027 capital forecast.
Yep.
So I compared that 10-year plan to this 10-year plan. And over the years, people would call me up and they would say, when's my street going to get rebuilt? So I would say, go refer to the 10-year capital plan. My problem is that we don't stick. The plan of 2017 is totally different to the plan of today. And I'm going to cite some examples that frustrate me. As an example, Church Street. Church Street in the 2017 plan, if I told somebody lived on Church Street in 2017, your street was going to get rebuilt in 2024. Now, according to this plan, we're looking at 2032. I'll use another example of John Street. And I'm going to come back to John Street later on because I want to compare John Street to another project that is on the capital list that wasn't on the capital list in 2017, and now it's on a capital list. And I don't understand how we bump things around. So John Street suddenly goes, I'm telling people that, oh, it was going to be done in 2025, according to 2017 plan. Now, we push John Street out to 2030. And I can cite a number of other examples of, and even streets that weren't on the 2017 10-year plan. Now, streets are on the 2025 plan. So I'm trying to understand when I tell somebody to go look at the list, gives you an idea. We've got this moving construction date, and it frustrates me. And the other thing that frustrates me when I look at this, and some of my comments again will come up when we talk about the complete streets, is that if we had a ward system in the city, we'd probably each be lobbying for infrastructure projects in our particular ward. But we don't have a ward system. Right. Fine. Yet, so much of the work, and I'm from the north side of the tracks in St. Thomas. I grew up. All the work, or the majority of the work, is focused in the south end of the city. And what about the people that live on Meada Street? The mayor and I can recall having conversations with a resident on Meada Street who has since moved. Oh, your street's going to get done. It's going to get done. It's not even, Meada Street's not even on this list. So as I say, I called Kevin this afternoon to give him a heads up to express my frustration, and I wanted him to say it publicly so that the public can hear why we have moving targets. But to anybody that I've told on John Street that your street was going to get rebuilt in 2025, I'm sorry. Now the earliest is going to be 2030, and I apologize to a couple residents over there for that. So perhaps, Kevin, you can untangle this for me.
Kevin, please tell us why one would move up or back.
Absolutely. So through yourself, Mayor Preston, to Councillor Peters, the 10-year capital forecast is a planning tool that we use to help prioritize projects and for a certain year. But it's a forecast. It's a moving target. It's never set in stone. And it's reviewed on an annual basis to account for funding availability, changes in strategic priorities, or changes in the asset condition. Some assets may not deteriorate as fast as others. Some may accelerate their deterioration. We may have different priorities than what we had 2 years ago, or certainly since 2017, our priorities may have changed. So for example, in this year's 10-year capital forecast, there was a more aggressive stance on removing combined sewers as a priority than there has been in the past. Not that we weren't addressing them, but we're addressing them a little bit more aggressively for the next couple of years. Reason being is our strategic priority has changed a little bit, and we know we're going to have interim flows coming from Yarmouth Yards that we need to convey to our pollution control plant. And we also need to make sure that we reduce as much I&I contribution to our pollution control plant in order to facilitate those interim flows. So we've had to adjust our 10-year capital forecast as a result. The comment about balancing investment north and south, the tracks type of piece. That balanced approach is a sustainable approach. So through our asset management planning process, we look at many different factors to determine the priority of a roadway. We look at the economic factors, the social factors, the condition, all to determine its risk. And that's how things are getting prioritized of whether it needs to move in this year or that year. The hard piece to all of this is the funding availability. How much do we have? How much can we actually get done in a year? What makes the most sense? And trying to coordinate that to be as efficient as possible. So for example, you'll see the Balaclava EA as a new project in 2025 that wasn't contemplated before, but there's an opportunity to leverage economies of scale by including that project work as part of the trunk sewer to Wharf 2 from Woodworth Ave. So the Environmental Assessment Act requires us to go through this process in order to be able to be in a position to time the construction activities and leverage that economy of scale. So there's many dynamic pieces that go into the capital forecast. I can say to you again, it's going to change again next year because we were just about to finish our asset management planning software application, which will enhance our ability to review all of the assets and determine their risk profiles and each of the candidates to be able to come up with a more comprehensive capital plan. So it will change again, and on an annual basis, there will always be tweaks to it.
Councillor Peters?
Well, perhaps as we go, thanks for the answer. But perhaps as we go forward, maybe we shouldn't include dates. Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has said to somebody, go look at this plan.
Yeah.
And that's when your road is going to get reconstructed. So I'm hoping as we have this new asset management tool that perhaps we don't include dates because it raises false expectations for residents on particular streets like John Street.
And Kevin, I might add, along with Councillor Peters, that we make if all stays the same, this is the date your road will be done. But we know that things change from year to year, or a water main break or some other things that happen, and we have to make decisions. Or as you said, taking advantage of the EA on Balaclava now, what wasn't even thought of, wasn't in our mindset. And now we know it's better if we spend the money there than if and somewhere down the capital list, something won't get done. But I'm okay at sharing with people the future and what it looks like. And if we're a couple of years off, sometimes we're early, sometimes we're late. I'm okay with putting that type of forward thinking or future thinking out there. But I agree. I don't want to disappoint anybody, but I refer people to that list a lot too, right? But maybe we can just simply add, if all stays the same this year, that's where it will be. Go ahead.
I think one thing through the mayor to council members to remember is this is a forecast, no different than your forecast when you see how much snow we're going to get. It's our best guess at this point in time with the information that we have. Things can change. We've seen that the amount that we can get done over recent years has decreased significantly as a result of inflation during the course of COVID. So we're still feeling those effects in terms of being able to get the same amount done. We just can't. So we have to scale it back. So that's going to have a residual effect throughout the rest of the forecast. So just something to keep in mind as well.
Okay. Further question, Councillor Peters? Any other questions on asset management? Seeing none, then we'll hand the podium over to the treasurer.
Okay, I just have a few slides here to go over some of the finer points of the 2025 proposed budget. So the 2025 recommended levy is $74 million. The 24 levy was 68, almost 69 million. That leaves an increase of $5.6 million in levy. When we take out our anticipated growth, that leaves an increase of 4.93. That equates to about $152 per year for the median residential house in St. Thomas. So in the budget process, departments submitted their budgets, kind of a wish list. When we got that, the levy increase was about 12%. We had a number of meetings where we were able to make a lot of cuts, and we got it down to 8.13%. Part of this, we made some adjustments to get it to here. Part of that was suspending our Integris payment for 2025. It's an internal loan. We can do what we like with that. Another thing was we reduced the capital contribution from levy by $250,000, and we input $477,000 from reserves to make up, so we're able to do some capital projects. You'll see in the capital, we're splitting 2 projects from fire services over 2 years for the truck and for radios. That moves $1,033,000 into the 2026 capital budget. 2025 grants. So there is the community grant policy that we have. The numbers that are currently in the budget are going by the grant policy. There has been a request for additional funds for two of the groups that receive grants. It was decided that we would work through the budget at the policy amounts, and council can evaluate the requests after budget. And if there is additional amounts granted, it'll come from reserves, the infrastructure reserve. So in the first slide, we are anticipating assessment growth of 3.2%. We don't have the final numbers yet. The current number is at 2.4%. We're anticipating it'll be somewhere in the area around 3.2%. But if it's higher or lower than amount, we'll adjust through the infrastructure reserve. So administration is recommending a $50 million 2025 capital budget. This includes almost $10 million in pre-approved from previous years. That leaves a $40 million capital budget for new funding. The budget includes $3 million for affordable housing. And the new animal shelter is also included in the budget and is expected to begin construction in 2025. So there's some items that are going to affect the 2026 budget. So when we suspended the payment for Integris for 2025, when we add that back, it'll be additional costs for 2026. And also if council decides adding back the $250,000 for capital, it'll be additional payments that'll put more pressure on 2026 budget. And if there's any difference in assessment growth, that'll also be added or subtracted from the amount. There's $1,033,000 also that I mentioned are the fire services projects that we're splitting over 2 years. So that amount gets pushed into 2026 also. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions immediately for the treasurer? He will be here while we're doing the rest. If not, we'll just kind of start where we're rolling. Councillor Baldwin Sands?
Thank you. I did approach the treasurer before tonight's meeting to ask him on page 2 in the diagram, it talks about Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. And I was hoping that he could give council an overview of how that has been working the last little bit and how it is going to be going forward.
Treasurer?
Thanks. I can't really comment on going forward. I can only comment on the past. I had a quick look in 2020. In 2016, we received around $3.1 million. And it's gone up most years. There was a couple years where there was a small drop, but this year we're anticipating 3.9 million. Well, not anticipating, we did receive our allocation. It's 3.9 million. It's based on a formula, so I guess if our population keeps growing, that number could keep growing too. So other than that, I don't know what the future holds for it.
Go ahead.
I was also hoping for an explanation as to what the fund is and what it's used for, who it is from, et cetera.
It's general funding from the province. It can be used, it's unconditional. It can be used for anything.
Councillor Kohler?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm through you to the treasurer. For next year, how difficult would it be to include, like this year would be the 2023 actual, but for next year, the 2024 actual, because I even tried to go back and forth between 2024 and 2023, but you're not dealing with year-to-date actuals again. So you're trying, it's difficult to look at a budget where you want to trim some, and I'm thinking that there could be some surplus, but you got to try to figure out what you're going to spend in the next two months since this goes to the end of October. But it'd be helpful if we had the previous year's actuals in there too, because even the format changed, so you can't really match up the GL code to the GL code. So even if you do think you found it, then you're still not really dealing with actuals. So it's hard to look at some of these where I'm assuming there's going to be a fairly significant surplus in it, but then you still have 2 months, and I don't know what's back-ended in expenses or what might be coming to that. So if there is a way to include the previous year actuals in the next one, it might help a little bit more.
Okay. Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Dan. I'm on page 8 of what I have here. I'm looking into the community grants. You say there's 2 substantial increases from two groups, 1 substantial increases. Can you name who the 2 groups are? And will that money come from the money we set up aside for grants, or will that money have to come from outside the money we have for grants?
Yes, it's the St. Thomas Cemetery Company and Ignite Youth Group. That money, if council decides in 2025 to get additional funding, that money will have to come out of infrastructure reserve. But in 26, it'll be added to the budget.
Okay, thank you.
If I can jump in on that one too, it was our intent tonight, because many councillors had asked me for this type of information, that we don't just proceed through the grant process or increases to the grant processes without having the groups come here and give us some sort of budget presentation. And so our intent was to pass the budget the way you saw the numbers in here tonight. And sometime before March, have each of those groups come forward and make a presentation to us. I'm not saying justifying their grant, but certainly if they're asking for more, justifying that and showing us their financial piece too. I know that every year we spend a lot of time talking about grants, and I use the same line every year, that no one, when I was knocking on doors, ever told me to give away city money to other organizations. So we will have that conversation, and we'll have them here and come to talk about the financial health of their organization and how we'll move forward. So it's not on the table for tonight's discussion, except in the numbers that you saw at the start. Okay, Councillor Kohler?
So what happens, because for myself, I would like to suggest the removal of one and then that I think is going to come back to the city sooner than later anyways, and I just hate to see us throwing good money after bad.
Well, I will suggest to our treasurer that we don't make these payments to these groups until the time as they've come here and kind of justified where they're at financially. Can we do it that way, treasurer? I don't think we'll hurt anybody by delaying a check by a month or two to these organizations. It's annual funding, so hopefully it will, it can work that way. And then we can, if a decision was made to add a group or remove a group, then we would make that decision at that time. But it gets it out of the discussion of $75 million worth of budget, and we don't spend a great deal of time talking about 40,000 here or 50,000 there. Tonight, we will spend the time talking about it when it comes forward. Further questions of the treasurer? Then I'd like to just suggest that we, in past years, have had great success in looking at our capital budget first. So that's the very large pullout sheet in your binders, and it comes up with a pretty large total. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner how much of it is coming out of the 2025 levy. And we'll discuss, we usually like to come to a conclusion on capital first, and then we can go individually through departments on operating if we need to after the fact. If you're okay with that, that's how we'll start. Questions on the capital budget? Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. This would be for our Fire Chief, Dave Gregory. I did contact him, and my question to him was, if I recall 3 or 4 years ago, we bought new radios for the fire department. And now they're asking for an update on radio for over $1 million. And Dave said he had a great answer, and I said, wait till I come to council. You can come up here and tell us all about why we need to spend $1 million on radios.
You're first, Chief.
To you, your worship, to
Yeah.
Councillor Herbert. So I think it was approximately 3 years ago that we purchased new radios for the fire service. These are the radios. They were end of life when we purchased them. Previous administration, they found a deal. They were end of life. They were a 7550 radio promoted by Motorola. They were a great deal. They were cheaper, but they were end of life cycle. So as we progressed and time went on, things like we can't get batteries for them. We're buying off of Amazon to try to find batteries, parts and replacement were non-existent. So when we reach out to our friends from Motorola or Bearcom, we could not replace those radios. So moving forward, and the radios that were purchased at the time are not firefighting radios. They're a police radio, a bylaw enforcement, or some other department that would use this style of radio. And in saying that, the reason why they're not firefighting radios is they're not safe. The buttons on top are great use with bare hands. And then there's a little tiny little button on top. I can even put a glove on that with your gloves on in an emergency situation, you can't operate the buttons. Well, I wanted to explain to you and be and zero transparency like with these. You can't operate the buttons. So in an emergency, so if you get into a hot zone where you're trapped or something and you need to make a radio thing, you have to take your gloves off. So once you take your glove off, you're compromised and you probably lost your hand due to the heat. And the other part of these, they have what they call a Mayday button. The last thing we want to hear from a firefighter is Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And then you have to push that little orange button with your gloves on or try to find it in the dark. With the new radios, we got the larger buttons that we can use with gloves on, and we have a huge Mayday button on the top and on the speaker mic. You can use it anytime with your hand, find it, and that is signaled back to dispatch and your command that you have a Mayday, and you can have life safety right away.
Okay. Other capital, Councillor Clark? And then we'll go to Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Just on the same topic.
While we have the chief at the podium?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was asking whether there's any advantage because technology changes so fast. You mentioned that the previous ones that you bought were end of life already. So I just want, my question was whether or not, because of changes in technology, whether there's any advantage to finding a company that leases them to you. And then you get the free upgrades, and whether they're leased to buy or whether you just walk away for them because they're no good to you after the lease is up.
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Clark. So speaking with Bearcom, who's is the rep for Motorola for Canada, there is that option out there. And the nice thing is, and when we spoke to them, they would love to take our money and take it up front and be out the door with 60 radios and all the portables and all the backbone that goes with it. But they highly recommend doing that, because if there is a change 2 years down the road, we're not on the hook to replace the radios. And then at the end of the payment schedule, and the deputy can, attest to this, that at the end of the payment schedule, if we really like these radios, there's a buyout cost of $10 a piece. If we don't like these radios and these aren't the radios to be, then you move on to something different or the other kind. And the nice thing about these radios is moving forward, and we've put it into our NG911 fund, is called P25. So what happened in the States with some of the stuff that happened with the Trump things, with P25, it'll allow everybody in the county, if they have the same radios, to talk amongst each other. Right now, if we had a call with one of our neighboring partners and we had a call, we have to have separate radios. So we had Central Algonquin, Southold, Bayham, Malahide, we'd have 4 radios set up because we can't talk interchangeably. With this radio, and if everybody moves forward with the P25, then we'll be able to talk amongst each other too. So absolutely, Councillor Clark, that's a great idea, because if there is a change, Bearcom will look after us with any of the changes, and it's not out of our pocket moving forward.
Councillor Clark?
I'm sure there's going to be a cost difference between buying them out and leasing them. And I'm just wondering if the reason why it wasn't recommended was because the cost was prohibitive, or is the cost close enough that when you add in the changes in technology that or the upgrades that you get over the years, whether or not it's close enough to make a move to pay for it over 5 years, and it lowers our percentage in this year, which is going to be a tough budget year.
Through your worship, back to you, Councillor Clark. I spoke with Treasurer Sheridan. There is a cost difference. I think the cost to buy them today is $1,035,000 to buy them outright. And I think the cost at the end of the lease, correct me if I'm wrong, Deputy, I think it's $1,085,000. So it's a $50,000 difference in the payment schedule over the 5 years. The nice thing is you don't pay a penny until they're delivered. So they're talking probably a 33-week delivery phase if you were to order them January 1st. And the payment on the first year was $100,000, roughly $105,000. And then the second year was the same. So it wasn't until the following year at the exact same time you paid the balance of that. Then going forward, it's around $18,000 every month over 60 months.
So I guess the question is, typical upgrades, what do they cost in a year? Any idea? Because that's
Through your worship, back to Councillor Clark, that's an unknown. We buy batteries. The batteries are expensive. They can be anywhere from $75 to $200 for batteries, antennas, stuff like that. But the programming is the biggest thing. If any changes in programming, much like we've seen with NG911, any of those programming costs and licensing fees, they change all the time. With any of the programming here, they just come in and do it as part and parcel of the whole, purchase point of getting the Motorola radios.
So next question would be then to the city treasurer of whether or not there's any advantage to moving to a lease as opposed to paying it all out in 1 year.
Got the treasurer.
Well, I'd have to check into it a little more, but when we buy them at the end of 5 years, we pay less and there are radios. If we lease them, we're continually paying more money over that time, and we don't have the radios we cost more money to buy them at the end. Leasing is more expensive than buying. It depends on the replacement and how many you have to replace, I guess.
I thought we could buy them for $10 at the end of the.
That's the cost of the
Right.
So for 5 years, over 5 years, the lease that was offered is $50,000 more than it would be to buy them outright. And if you have to continue paying that ongoing, then it's quite a bit more expensive.
Okay, I'm not following. Wouldn't the total cost be the 10,000 each year? Not, I don't see how it would add up and get worse.
I'll have to check into it more to get more details. In my impression, looking at it, it was quite a bit more money to do it this way. We'll have to find out what happens after the 5 years. If there's an advantage to it, for sure, we'll do whatever is the best.
But am I summing it up right there for you that, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, and we have the treasurer here, it's about $100,000 a year to start the lease. And over 5 years, it would be 500,000 plus 50,000.
It's 18,000 a month.
Okay?
So that's 205,000 a year.
Is that where we at? I mean, I want to make sure we're talking apples and apples. You and I had a conversation on this. Chief and I have had a conversation on this. So, we're at this, according to this capital budget, over 2 years, we're going to spend $1 million on radios.
Yeah.
If we lease them, that's still over 2 years, we spent $1 million. If we lease them, we're under 500,000 in those 2 years of costs. And then we continue to lease.
Yeah, it all depends on what happens after the 5 years, right? And ongoing. We don't want to keep paying that indefinitely.
Okay. Chief, do you have any other information on that?
Through you, Your Worship, and I can clear this with the treasurer. So according to what they had sent us through Bearcom, through their account executive, it's a 60-month payment.
5 years.
With a $10 buyout at the end per radio. And it's monthly payments of $18,042 plus tax. So pricing's, credit approval, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a one-time $1,000 tax administration. So at the end of 60 months, you own the radios with an administrative cost of $10 per radio if you want to keep them. My recommendation is, at the end of it, I would look at some, if they're fantastic, you keep them. If they're not fantastic, then move on to something different. But it's, I look at it as a savings over, it's sure that the final cost is $50,000 more if you do the math. But it's a gamble, but I don't know. My recommendation would be to lease them, but if the treasurer has a better way of doing it, then I'm all for what the treasurer wants to do.
I'm with you both. So I don't want it to end up costing us a whole lot in the end either, but if the leasing can be equivalent to the cost of buying them and the buyout at the end makes sense, then I'm okay at finding that in this year's budget, right? So can we work together on that one? And I take it you're not desperate to order them tomorrow morning or by the end of this year, but it's in 2025's budget that we'll do it, right? So can we defer what's there, knowing that at least part of it's coming back, if not all of it?
Through your worship, absolutely. That's a great recommendation.
Okay, let's talk about a bunch more things. What else is in the capital budget? I had Councillor Baldwin Sands next, and then Councillor Peters.
Thank you. My first question is not necessarily a question, but for Michael Carroll, if I could please. I'm just very glad to see that the city is investing in some capital for Valley View, a place where our residents call home. And I was wondering if Mr. Carroll could provide an update to the essential items that we are receiving for under capital at Valley View. And that's my first question.
Mr. Carroll, always great to have you here, and you come so seldom. I don't know what it is. So.
It's great to be here,
Yeah.
Your Worship. Thank you. Just to understand, you want me to go over the items that are included in the capital budget for Valley View? Did I hear you correct?
Please, if you want
If
to.
you could, please,
Okay,
because we
yeah.
have deferred some of these items over time. So to see them here, I'm very glad to see that these items are here.
I can certainly do that. We're doing some work on our roof. Our roof is now, of course, our building is coming into its 20th year of existence. It's hard to believe where those 20 years have gone. But our roof is in need of, our flat roof, of some remediation work. And so we're planning on doing that. we're investing some money in our beds. A lot of our beds are, again, 20 years old. Some of them came over from the old home, actually, so they're older than that. And they've served us well, but it's time to move forward and purchase approximately 70 new beds for our home. And a third item in there is some of our lifts and resident lifting devices need to be replaced. They have a life that we can only go so long for because of safety reasons. And so we're going to move forward with those as well. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that the recommendation is here going forward to invest in Valley View. My next question, if I could, is for Mr. Bray. I have 2 questions for him, if I could, please.
Okay, you go ahead and start them while he makes his way to the podium, please.
Sure. On page 28, we're talking about the dam assessment. I was just wondering if there is going to be some work with KCCA on this dam assessment?
Thank you, Mayor Preston, through you. Yes, they'll be involved in the assessment as well.
Thank you, because as the representative with Councillor Herbert on KCCA, we are also responsible for the dam just slightly upstream from there, and it is too approaching end of life. So thank you for that.
And we've been in contact with the CA, so they're aware this is happening.
Thank you. And then I have a second question on something that I didn't see in the capital that I chatted with you quickly before the meeting started. Last year, we started a program with the YMCA with $100,000 for 10 pass cards for city residents. It was started later and then it was put on hiatus while the city operated the summer pools. At St. Thomas prices, you could purchase a 10 pass card. I'm just saying that I've heard nothing but accolades about the program, but I didn't see it in here to continue. Can you talk about as to why?
If I could jump in, we're on capital. That's not a capital, it's an operating. Am I correct?
It would have been a capital. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That look on your face said, yes, it was operating. Yeah, yeah, that.
It's in Parks and Rec
Thank you.
costs.
Yes, thank
But
you.
under the
Yeah, it wasn't-
operating side.
Well, if you would like, I'll withdraw my question and bring
We'll
it up
get to
again in
operating?
operating, if you wish.
Expect a question when we get to operating.
Thank you, Mayor Preston.
All right.
Thank you.
You got any more, Councillor Baldwin-Sens? Not right now. Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess I'll start with, I'm just going to focus in on Kevin right now, and then I'll come back to some others. Capital project, complete streets. Page 7. So I'm going to use the tale of 2 streets. John Street, which we said we were going to do in 2025, which was on the 2017 list. John Street, according to the current maps, has got fair roads, fair sanitary, the water's not too bad. Forest Ave, which was not on the 2017 list, according to the current list, things are low chance of failure, low chance of sanitary failure, low chance of water failure. I believe the roads are fair. I'm trying to understand how John Street, which was identified 7 years ago, gets bumped and Forest Ave suddenly makes it to the top of the list. Yet when I look at the map that's included in the capital budget, things look a lot better for Forest Ave. And I have lots of friends on Forest Ave.
Careful who
Yeah,
you're.
I know, but I have lots of friends on John Street too.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand how something gets bumped up as more of a priority when our own maps look like John Street is a worse street than Forest Ave. And so why does Forest Ave suddenly become priority and John Street gets bumped down the list?
Mr. Diehlbeck, on that specific one.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Peters, I'll take that back and I'll look at that specific one and give you the detailed answer as to why it moved.
My next one is,
Your microphone.
my next one is Balaclava Street. I heard your explanation earlier about the need for the trunk sewers and to do an EA. But why do we need to build a road to put a trunk sewer in? This extension of Balaclava from South Edgeware through to Dalewood is a road to nowhere, other than it speeds up traffic a little bit, but it's dissecting two schoolyards. We have no assessment growth that we can utilize off of either side of the street. And so I'm at a real loss to understand why we would proceed with an EA to build a road that doesn't go anywhere other than it goes somewhere. It goes from Balaclava and South Edgeware to Dalewood Drive, but it's dissecting two schoolyards. It just doesn't make any sense. I can understand if we have to put a trunk sewer down it, we can put the sewer down, put the grass back on, and the kids have someplace to play. So why do we have to build a road to build a trunk sewer?
Mr. Dudek, is it a road?
Through the mayor to Councillor Peters, this is an EA to look at a road connection from Balaclava to Dalewood in behind the Lock School. The property is owned by the city at this point in time. Unfortunately, the transportation master plan recommendations haven't come forward to council at this point, but I can say from the draft that I've seen, this was identified as an opportunity to improve the intersection at Dalewood and South Edgeware Road. We get complaints every day about the issues that are created at that intersection. There is a lot of vehicle movement happening through that intersection. This provides an alternative route that will be able to basically cul-de-sac, if you will, Dalewood at South Edgeware Road, or yes, at South Edgeware Road. No, Woodward Ave at Dalewood.
Right.
Sorry, around the top.
Yeah.
So you're right, we could put the trunk sewer in there, but why not leverage the economies of scale in order to provide a relief for the intensification that we're likely to see in the downtown core for those that want to get out of the city. And so that's what the transportation model is showing. And so you'll see that in the future. I've seen it through the draft. It's being accelerated again because of changing priorities. To your further comment or concern, Councillor Peters, things change each year. And so this is one of those ones where no one really saw this coming, but we see this opportunity to leverage that.
Well, thanks. I don't support this project. I don't think it needs to be in here. The congestion exists 2 times a day when school goes in and when school goes out. And here we are trying to solve another school board's problem. Perhaps if the school board moved their school bus loading zone to the east side or west side of Lock School, that would start to alleviate some of this. But I just see this as an expenditure that this is only $300,000 to do the EA. Then we got to look at build a road on top of that. So I lean towards not even including this one, but I'll leave it at that. That's all I have on this one. I do have one more that I want to ask about.
Go for it while you're here.
I know we had a previous report to council about this, and I'm not, it's going down the road of the capital project on speed control. This $100,000 that we're spending, again, much like Balaclava, I sense is just part one of expenditures, that this just gets us something. And I'm curious from, I guess, either from Kevin or the police chief, who is here as well too, to know whether this is going down this road is really going to be the best thing to do to deal with speed control, or perhaps 12 new officers that are going to get hired can do a better job for us. But I just want to know, because I realize that this is phase one, and phase one means there's going to be other phases that are going to cost more money. Is this a worthwhile investment?
Kevin, on that one, and knowing that you and I spoke about it, but council hasn't heard kind of where we're headed on this. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Preston, to Councillor Peters. So the speed management program, you'll recall a report from earlier this year where we looked at our community safety zones and automated speed enforcement. And so one of the pieces of direction that council provided staff was to go back and develop a speed management program or a traffic calming program. We've seen an increase in the number of speeding complaints that we're receiving to the city about trying to address and calm traffic. That's gone up by about 46% over the last 4 years. So the service level that we're providing isn't meeting what the community expectation is. The purpose of this program is to start to implement some measures, some traffic calming measures. They could be non-physical, they could be physical measures. We don't know what those are. That's what this funding is for, is to help deal with those. We saw a petition come to council for Miller's Pond subdivision area, but council had asked us to come up with a consistent approach to deal with those. While we're trying to move towards ASE, if that's the direction council wants to go, we still need to implement an administrative penalty system in order to deal with the tickets that would be issued through ASE, because the court system would not be able to handle that. So we got to do something in the meantime before we're able to implement automated speed enforcement. The other piece I just wanted to highlight is that automated speed enforcement is only allowed in your school zones and your community safety zones. So speeding concerns outside of those areas will be left to some other device. This is the other device that's being proposed as part of the 2025 budget.
Okay. Further capital budget questions? Councillor McCauley.
Thank you, Your Worship. This question is for Jeff. In the capital budget, this is something that is not in there, but we did receive an email from a resident who was asking about the gym at the Joe Thornton Arena, and it was referring to pockets of air that's lifting up the concrete or lifting up the flooring, and there's duct tape being used to keep the holes covered. So I'm just wondering if that might be something that's just part of every day, or is that something that's on your radar?
Thank you, Mayor Preston. We're aware of that. People have made comments about, for lack of a better term, dead spots in the floor for pickleball players. We are getting that. The floor is a few years old now, so we are getting costs to repair the floor, but you just can't fix the dead spots. We've had people come in and look at them. There were some holes that were duct taped over. Those have been repaired. Those have been spot repairs, but in terms of correcting the dead spot, that would require a whole floor replacement. So that would be a future capital expenditure.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor McCauley? On capital, while you have the floor? Councillor Kohler?
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess mine's more of where I want to end up with the budget, because I too, like other councillors, have looked through and kind of questioned why certain roads weren't added when other roads were, but I think pretty much had that every budget where you could agree or disagree with what's put forward, but I honestly can't really come up with an argument why other roads should be ahead of some of the other ones. Councillor Peters brings a good point with the Balaclava connection there, and if there's 300,000 that we could save there, I'd be willing to remove that, because I just see, depending on how that goes, a stretch of road that maybe people can even gain more speed with 2 playgrounds on either side, and I'm not sure if that's such a good idea. But ultimately, the way I was looking at this, I'd like to trim another 2% off of this budget. I think, as I've been saying all along, as we've got some pretty good growth coming on, I'd like to see us soften the blow for these early years and put it back on. Got a pretty good presentation on our capital projects on how we're gaining ground. It still shows a gap, but we're doing a good job with that. And I'll be quite honest with you, this is probably the first time I've ever been on council where I've heard people say, please don't do any more construction. Normally you hear, come on, when are you going to fix the roads? When are you going to do that? But people are actually asking for relief on that. On the same token, I don't want to see too much of what's here cut, but I would like to see us fund a little bit more to the tune of 2% from the infrastructure reserve towards capital to bring it down another 2%. And again, I think that within the budget, there's quite a bit of room where we're going to probably see some surpluses, but it's hard to argue that right now and put forward a good stance on that with the way it's come to us. And I do want to commend staff for the work that they have done. They've, I think, listened and heard that we like to soften the blow, and they've done a pretty good job at doing that. And I personally think that we can do a little bit more without too deep of cuts. And then when you look at 2026, there's over $800,000 that we can put back into the infrastructure reserve or towards capital when the Valley View debt is retired at that point. And then again, with the future growth that will come on. So it's not something where I don't want people to say, well, you're just trying to fund this out of reserves, and then that's going to create a bigger problem down the road, because we'll just, in my mind, there's going to be quite a bit of growth coming forward later on that we can then increase that spending and just soften the blow for the current ratepayer of today. So that's where I'm looking at. I did have some other cuts that I was going to look at the operating budget, but again, I'd sooner see us fund that through reserves in the capital and then replenish any surplus we have from the what I think is going to happen out of the budget back into infrastructure reserves that way.
What is the dollar amount in infrastructure reserve funding you're talking about? I know you said 2%, but can you?
Yeah, so, well, I think 1% what equates to 490,000. So it's under an additional $1 million coming out of the infrastructure reserve that's currently sitting at, I think that'll draw it down to that would take it down to at a closing balance of, if you use $1 million, it would leave it at 2,969,000 left in the infrastructure reserve if we did that. And like, as I say, as those other items come forward, to replenish that back into it.
As we take anything out of reserves, I always like to defer to the treasurer to at least give his thoughts on it.
1% will be 690,000, so we're looking at 1.3 million. Just one thing you noted about the Valley View debenture. That money, council is already committed that money to pay the grants to the hospital and the hospice.
Last year's budget, we deferred to 2026, 2025, 2026 to do that, yes? Further talk on capital, and I'll try and summarize where we're at this point after I get in. Councillor Wookey, you have your hand up. I'm going to go to you and then Councillor Gibson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Looking through the capital budget, it's been, for me, the simplest year in the last 10 years for this, because I didn't see anything that I really wanted to trade off. It's just part of the cycle where we are at, I believe. So basically, I came on just to say that I support what's in the capital budget, and I'm looking forward to discussing the overall budget increase, as Councillor Kohler's talked about. I see this as it's part of the ebb and flow of finances, and some years it's a little bit more, some years it's a little bit less. In terms of this year, our operating budgets are up because there's some hiring going on, but that's just the cycle of growth. So I just wanted to come on to say that I'm good with capital budget, and I thought it was the simplest, in my mind, the simplest year in the last decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wookey. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Worship. In regards to the extension of Balaclava Street, I feel that could be like a drag strip, you know, like Speedy. We're trying to find calming initiatives for the streets we already have. And, you know, I do realize there's no residential in that area. It could probably be an 80-kilometer run, which we really Do we really want that? I would be in favor if we did our trails through that area between the schools.
I was going to ask that question of Kevin and or Jeff. We know we want to connect to the trail down behind the hospice down into Waterworks Park. Would that make this an opportune time to do that?
Through the mayor to yourself and
Sure.
Councillor Gibson.
It was all her idea that caused this, so go ahead.
The Bellaglava extension is to explore those opportunities. There's curvature to the roadway. We know that the school board has been interested in trying to do something different with their bus bays, as Councillor Peters had indicated. We've shared with them that looking at an EA of what that might look like. Active transportation will be absolutely one of those pieces, and how we could connect down into the trail network that's through the ravine area and to the Dalewood Conservation Area. We know that that is a hot active trail that's being used for recreational purposes. So this would help provide those pieces. And at this point, there's no shovels going in the ground. This is all desktop work at this point. Which actually, sorry, would have to come back to council, similar to Fairview Avenue, corridor study for endorsement before you would be able to move forward with any type of construction in that area. The last piece I just wanted to close out with is that the funding for this is not from the tax levy. So it's not going to impact the capital budget in that regard. Same with the speed management program.
It has to show up in the far right-hand column to be covered by the levy this year. There are other pots of money, whether they're grants or OSIF funding or other things that are being used before it goes to the levy side. Further questions or more, Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Your Worship. It sounds like this side of the room is unanimous on Balaclava. We don't want it. And I think whether it's costing us any money or we can use that grant money someplace else, I would not agree with that move at this time, or probably ever, for all the reasons that have been mentioned. I did raise the fire radios, and it'd be nice if we could clear that up, if that's if that's an area that we could, if it doesn't cost a whole lot over the 5 years, it moves some of the money around and lowers the overall expenses this year. Just a question on the library and their project for $750,000. I know it mentions it's from a special reserve or whatever the wording was on that. And I just wondered what the source of those reserves were.
Well, Heather, great to have you here tonight too. It's like Michael, we almost never get to see you unless I'm dressed foolishly or doing something with reading to children. I get to go over and play at the library. But can you help Councillor Clark with what the project is? And then we'll ask the treasurer yourself what reserve this is coming from.
Sure. Through you to Councillor Clark. So Marianne Neely gave us, over $1 million. And it's been sitting there for a fair amount of time. And we are really looking for a project where we can have a naming opportunity. And this is a dead zone for us over there. So we want to do something that creates a sense of wonder and also teaches about nature and also ecology and all of that sort of thing. So that's where it would come from.
Thanks. And the other area, and it's kind of, I don't know if we'll bring it up in operating or not, but we talked when we did our strategic plan about Valley View.
Yep.
And just recently, a couple of days ago, the provincial government came out with proposed legislation, Support for Seniors and Caregivers Act 2024, $114 million for a number of initiatives to improve the lives of seniors through supports and programs. And part of it is to extend day programs. Part of it is for new beds. We saw last week the announcement at Extendicare in Port Stanley. So I want to give a little bit of background and then talk about the budget, because in 1968, we had our new, what at that time was the new Valley View, 144 beds on the old St. Thomas Collegiate site. 2006, we moved over to where we are. So where there was 144 beds, we moved to the new building. We have 136 beds in 2006. Here it is 2024, and we have not expanded on those beds. We have a day program, and we haven't been able to expand on that. Valley View with 136 beds right now has a waiting list of 428 people. And if we added up Crescent Care, Elgin Manor, we've got locally for our senior citizens, 420 beds with 946 people on a waiting list. And that's just going to get worse as the city grows and as people age and live longer. The number of long-term beds that are going to be needed in St. Thomas, and I guess you could say by extension Elgin County, is just going to continue to grow. I know we've talked about it a little bit when we did our strategic plan about thinking ahead, and so budget time is the time that I wanted to raise this, because whether we're getting rid of the debt from the old Valley View, we've committed some of that to other things. We need to start thinking about, as we are with some things going over multiple years, how we can start to plan, because we're talking about a civic center and we're talking about a whole bunch of things. And we need more beds, and we need an expanded day program. And to build a new home typically is 5 to 8 years out from whenever you decide to do it. So if we're at a stage where we still don't know where the new building would be or how many beds it would be or what the future looks like, you can imagine how far we're going to be behind the 8 ball 8 years from now if we don't start planning either in this budget or the next budget. So I guess one part of it is whether or not there's anything in, when we talk about operating, whether Michael has anything in his budget to do a bit of a study, or whether or not we look at through the budget process this year where there's money someplace for a study. There's room on, I know from previous talks we've had, that there's room on the site for 100 and some odd more beds. But whether that's ideal or whether you move to a new location, build bigger. And then we have the whole day program issue where there's a huge waiting list and caregivers are getting burned out and they need the support. We've done a great job on housing in this last term because we put our lenses to it. We made a commitment to it, and we're looking after I think it's time that we put the same lens on seniors now that we have on the homeless. And I think because we know that it's tight this year and next, that we've got a lot of development coming with the Yarmouth Yards and other projects. Now's the time to do the planning for it so that we're ready when the new revenue comes, that we've got a plan and we can move forward. So that's my soapbox for tonight on where we need to go. But I think at some point,
I can't believe you only have one soapbox tonight, Councillor Clark.
at some point tonight, and maybe on the operating side, is we've got to come up with a little bit of a plan here to move forward and get some initial work done.
Okay.
Thank you.
I saw a real fight as to who wanted to get up and talk about this, but I guess we'll let the treasurer, and then I wanted to add something to what Councillor Clark just said too, please.
Thank you. Through you, I just wanted to add, the plan is to do a feasibility study in 2025. It'll come out, it was in capital, we pulled it out, and it's going to go into operating, probably be covered by development charges.
And that's what I was going to suggest, as we've put together a great committee of council looking at the civic center or rec complex, whatever. We need to do the same thing so that we're on that path. And if I can look to my strategic plan expert, I know it's in there. So it would mean we have to ask ourselves at least a number of times a year, where are we on that plan? So thank you for bringing it up. Councillor Peters?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I had one last question for Jeff Bray. Jeff, the Talbot Street Park redevelopments. You know, I can remember seeing a plan in the past of trying to extend Hepburn Park and do connecting to down to Center Street. But I also really like, I like how we have like almost a civic square on Moore Street on the old Sutherland site. What kinds of things are you looking at that we could possibly do on the Sutherland site? Like an outdoor skating rink that could double as a pad for the summertime that could be used for Oktoberfest dances.
Yes.
That people could go polka on. That I just, you know, I know the city's has a lot of money invested in the Sutherland Press site, and I guess if we give the go ahead to proceed, we're never going to put the Sutherland Press site up for sale to try and recover those costs. But I'm just curious to what are you envisioning and working with Mr. Gunn on, particularly Moore Street?
Thank you, Mayor Preston. We've done some preliminary designs. We cost shared with Mr. Gunn, if he's here. Hi, Andrew. So we've got some high level designs. Andrew's done some outreach with students on their thoughts through his programming. What we're looking at this point, and we'll take it public, I'll do a presentation to council in the new year, is we're looking at a space that can be changed up, kind of following what your thoughts were, so that it can be a passive space, but actively programmed for things like Oktoberfest, whatever people want to program it. One of them, one of the concepts that we have does utilize a stage area that when it's not a staged area, it's just an area where people can sit and relax. One thing I'd like to work with Kevin is actually expanding that area right through Moore Street so that it effectively doubles the size of the programmable recreational space there.
You're talking about the Moore Street parking lot or using some of our land there?
Moore Street itself,
Moore
where it
Street
comes
itself.
under to Talbot.
Okay.
Yeah, on that block, yeah.
Super. Councillor Clark?
Thanks. Just while we got Mr. Bray up there, I had a couple people asking, we did the refurb at Pinafore on the old main pavilion, and we've never kind of moved upstairs. And I know it was partly probably because of the cost of elevator and things. And I'm just wondering if there's been any grants or any movement on opening up that upstairs space.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. We have looked at that, and you're correct. We would, there's fire code issues. There's also structural that would have to be addressed, as well as the washrooms and a lift at the very minimum to get up there. So the cost expenditure would be significant. We actually have I've been here 3 years. We've only had one request for that space. It doesn't seem to be in demand.
Okay. Great. Further capital expenditure discussion. Let me try and summarize what we've heard and what we might do. Councillor Clark, you're itching to get on another soapbox. I'm just kidding.
No. I'm just wondering, I'm guessing there's 4 votes here to exclude Balaclava Street, and I'm wondering if we could clear that up, or is that going to be part of your conversation?
Part of what I'm talking about. I'll ask that question first. Mr. Diebeck, on Balaclava, this is an EA cost only to move forward. We've certainly have enough conversation about not wanting it to be a road, but do we need to put the wastewater pipe under that area? And is that part of what the EA is?
Through council to our Mayor Preston, the EA for Wharf 2 looked at where the trunk sewer pipe could go through. Unfortunately, it didn't include this aspect to it, so that's what this is for. The EA is pegged at about 10% of the construction cost, which is triggering the need to move forward with a Schedule C. So that's why it's before you as an opportunity to coordinate those works in terms of construction timeframe.
So my question is then, okay to move ahead? I mean, for those that would be against looking to build a street there, are we okay to go ahead on the EA to hook recycling water?
Through the mayor to council, if there's no road construction, there's no environmental assessment trigger. The trigger is the construction value. If the
Okay.
construction value was $2.5 million, there would be no need to do the EA.
Okay? So I'm looking at direction from council, and I feel I have the majority here that's saying, don't do a road there. But if it was going to be a pipe underground and a trail above, but we would still wouldn't trigger the EA? Sounds like you've got some guidance. Let's see what we do with it, right? Okay, if I can summarize what we've talked about on here from a levy point of view, the biggest one, there's two big ones. One is converting the fire department radios from $1,035,000 over 2 years to $220,000 a year over 5 years, which would make it $1,100,000 versus $1,035,000 over 2 years. But we're going to leave this discussion to take place between the treasurer and the fire chief. We also talked today about another way we might be able to debenture that cost or internal loan, but right, an internal loan on the total or spreading out. But I'd love to get this year. That's shaving basically $200 and some thousand off capital costs on that alone. So. Well, I get we're pushing it off into, because it's 220 year over 5 years or 500,000 over 2 years. But at the end of it, it looks like we end up with the same 5-year-old radios, but we can purchase these on a buyout so anyway, that was one of the conversations. The other conversation was taking something out of reserve funds infrastructure reserve funds. Looking for about a 2% amount was $1.3 million. And the conversation from the treasurer on that is it wouldn't be repaid back automatically in next year because we're changing some debt structure, but we'd have to refill the reserve fund in a different way. So on anything I haven't mentioned on here, Balaclava has been mentioned a couple of times, and that may reduce the $100,000 worth of expenditure on it, but that's not eliminating it. I want to break those two down into further discussion or vote, or Councillor Peters?
I just want to go back to I'm trying to, is the proposed tax levy 8.13 or is it 4.93?
It finals at 4.93 with increased revenue from growth in this year. So it starts at, truly, we're spending 8 point something more than last year. Yeah. But if you look back at last year, I think we spent something like 7% more than the year before. But because of growth helping drive that levy down, we were able to come in at 3 point whatever we came in at. So, yeah, so that's what causes where we are today. Because really inflation is also attacking all of this, we get far closer. We get 4.9 by saying, even though it's greater than that to start with.
So you want to get it down to 3%?
I'll take your direction, Councillor Kohler. You brought up the use of reserve funds, and this council needs to know what the good and bad side of doing that is. So one, it does allow us to lower this amount by, in this case, about a 2% number, right? That's off capital. If we left operating alone, we would end up with a budget levy that's about 2% less, but we sure end up with less in a reserve fund. We have to all face with ourselves as to what does that mean over time. But did I describe that well enough, Jeff? Further discussion? Councillor Kohler?
Your worship, you did a great job of explaining that, but I on the same token, I want to look at again, one of the reasons we're coming to budget early is so we can realize
Get stuff
gains,
to the street. Yep.
gains in the capital. So I'm looking, we'll use that now. It's almost like you saying, we're going to debenture or borrow from ourselves. So we're going to borrow from yourselves to pay for the radio out of our reserves, right?
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying is let's soften that blow now. Because we're doing this, I think we're going to get some great pricing on our capital works that can replenish back in. I think there's padding in the operating budget, but again, it's the way we have it here. It's hard to argue that, but I think we're gonna get some surplus from there too that can go towards that. And then again, from future revenue, look at how we're going to replenish that back up and get back up to the levels that we need to be to deal with our infrastructure deficit. So it's not something that I want to see cut. I certainly don't want to see any of the projects cut. I just want to soften that blow till the goose lays its golden egg, right? So.
Okay. All right. I feel sorry. Oh, Councillor Woodkey. I see your hand and your hand. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. I mean, agreeing with Councillor Kohler is a very easy thing to do, except for the fact that on the other side of it, then what's the point of having reserves? Like, what are they for anyway? Are they for this? Are they for something else? Are they for something that, you know, cataclysmic? Are they like, what is from the treasurer's point of view, what's the purpose of having them at all? And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying, I see one hand clapping here. It'd be very easy to cut $1 million take $1 million out of that. But on the other side, what's it for and what's the likelihood of it needing to be used in the next couple of years, given the fact that we've got a lot of other things going on. So I'd like to hear from somebody who knows a lot more than me, because I don't even pretend to be the assistant treasurer. Thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, we're assuming you're it.
Thank you, through you. The infrastructure reserve is fairly healthy, but it is the place where we go for everything, right? When these tenders are coming in, if we're over or under, we take from there or give from there. So I can't really, I can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but it won't put us in a really, really bad shape, but of always, I would not like to see it as being the treasurer. I want as much money available as possible.
I've never heard a treasurer wouldn't disagree with that, but let me try something here. You want to go ahead, Councillor Clark? You go ahead first.
Just trying to ask whether in the last 5 years, have we had a deficit in any of those years, or have we had a surplus every year with the budget?
That's a great question. I think I know the answer, but growth has been, go ahead.
Yeah, we've had good surpluses for we had 1 year where it was pretty small, but other than that, they've been healthy. This year, as the budget monitoring said, could be a different type of year because of everything that went on. We still could end up with a probably smallish surplus, but yeah.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion. You can live with me. I'm here to help move things along. I think we'll need to have further discussion on the fire department's radios, and that can cap. And the worst case is it's 500,000. Better case is it's spread out over a period of time. I want that discussion to take place, and it will come back in. I'm going to ask Councillor Kohler if he's okay with halfway. If we didn't take a full 2% out of it to help lower this, but if we lowered it by 1%. There's a little bit of water with our wine to take capital expenditure down by about 650,000, I guess that would be, and lower ourselves by a point. We would be leaving capital, not counting fire radios, where there might be some other savings, at 1% less going into operating. I want somebody who's really mad at me to say, no, we can't do that, Chair. Not hearing it. I'm saying capital is okay with what we just suggested. All right. I'll take 5 minutes and we'll go to operating. Is that okay? Does everybody need 5 minutes? Yeah, okay. 5 minutes, we go to operating. I have 7:02, so 7:07, I'd like to get back into operating. And then we'll move forward on operating, see if we can finish this. Thanks. Okay, team, we've got what we think is a conclusion to capital expenditures. We're going to look at operating expenditures. I would be amiss if I did not say how much work has been going on around here for the last 3 or 4 months in every department you can possibly look at, trying to get this number to be as good as it can be for 2025. That's not to say that you're not allowed to ask questions. Of course, let's take a look at everything as diligently as we can. That's what council's job is. And let's look at operating. So questions on operating. Councillor Peters.
I'll have a couple others, but I just want to ask a general question to the treasurer. When we looked at every department that can generate revenue, whether that is a fee or a user fee, whatever, we have looked at everybody, I'm assuming, has adjusted their user fees or whatever fees up. I hope that there's nothing that has been flatlined, because if the general taxpayer is going to have to pay a little more to provide the whole of the services of the city, I think it's incumbent on anybody that uses any one of our facilities that they should be paying more as well too, to help defray those costs.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, through you. Yeah, the ones where that generate a lot of fees, like Parks and Rec, they've been updating their fee rates, and they've included that. I can't speak for all the departments. Some have generate very little fees. It's kind of all, I know most departments have been talking. We were going to do a consolidated fee rate bylaw, but a while ago, but that hasn't been done yet. There's some probably that are still in the process of doing that, but those ones wouldn't generate a pile of money, in my opinion.
I think it's a great point, though, Councillor Peters, that we also look at that type of user fee cost that is out there. So, but we can do that anytime through a year. We're not only held to budget time in setting those fees. And I saw from our agenda tonight, we're looking at Parks and Recs fees coming back to us at next meeting. So we can continue to do that. Bring it up every week if you've got another thought as to where we can be. On operating, who wants first? Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. I would like to bring up the issue that I brought up underneath capital.
Okay.
I felt with a one-time payment, it would be a capital item, but been corrected that it is an operating expense. Last year, this council agreed to put $100,000 for 10 pass cards for city residents, City of St. Thomas residents, so that city residents can purchase a 10 pass card to swim at the YMCA at St. Thomas prices of $35 for a 10 pass card. I've heard nothing but accolades about this process. And I, again, want to thank you for this innovative approach as we are building as the capacity to work together to hopefully build our own community aquatic facility. But I didn't see it in operating, and I didn't see it in capital. So I was wondering as to why, and if you gave a wonderful explanation before we started as council, I was wondering if you could share that with the rest of council. Thank you.
Mr. Bray, please.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Now that we're in operating, this program started just before JC's pool opened, and as everyone will recall, it gets suspended while our pool is operating. So for the first month and a half or so, it was just swim passes. Then in September, we opened up lessons. It has been popular. To date, we've spent about $10,000 out of that fund. So we decided to just let it run its course through the year to an upset limit of the approved 100,000. I will be doing a report to council in February explaining what the uptake has been and what our plans are.
Go ahead.
So thank you very much for that explanation. Under the same vein of the community center, and I did do a little bit of a straw poll with this, but my next question is for the treasurer, if I could please. We as the city receive tax revenue from gaming. And what I'm requesting is that moving forward, we create a reserve account underneath the same vein that we do for others to develop a reserve account using the money that we receive every year from gaming as what the city of St. Thomas receives from gaming here locally, and hopefully put that towards a reserve fund for down the road, a community aquatic facility. That way we have some base, some ground game to move forward with, some monies going forward. And I'm hoping to put that forward to my councillors, but I would like to hear some comments from the treasurer. Thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, on that point?
Thank you. If council, if that's council's wishes, we could do it. It would come out of operating. Right now, that money goes directly into operating, so it would be a hit to the levy a little bit, but we could certainly do it.
Can you tell us how much rounded up?
400? It's gone up a lot in the last few years, and this year's budget's around 400,000.
So almost a point, half a point to a point. Okay, so if we isolate it just to a reserve fund, then we would see that rise in levy. Go ahead.
Thank you. If it is council's wish, I will readjust the amount to an upset limit of between 150 or 200,000 per year of that money that is received from gaming, as opposed to the full amount that the city receives.
Further comment on that from any of council? It's simply moving. Go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I think to build on some of the creativity that Councillor Baldwin Sands is talking about doing this, you know, I know she's raised in the past other things like vacant land taxes, you know, just in a general sense, are there some things that we could be doing as a community that can either help to go support a reserve fund for a pool or to help the general levy? You know, if there was something on a vacant land tax as an example, that might help to encourage redevelopment of some of these sites as well, if nothing else. But I'd be interested in knowing what other tools could be out there in our toolbox to help us increase revenues. So I'm not looking for an answer right now, but to build on what Councillor Baldwin Sands is, where she's going.
If you're okay, can we bring that back under new business under a regular council meeting? We now know we want it as part of this, part of our revenue structure, but I'd like to have a maybe more fulsome discussion about what would go into a fund or what would the fund be good. So
If it is the wish of council, we could also discuss it at our next committee meeting, which is happening next
Tomorrow.
week,
Tuesday?
Tuesday.
I don't know. Seems to me I saw one this week sometime.
I think it's next Tuesday.
Okay, could be.
And we'll have the fulsome discussion there and bring back all of
Committee
those
report.
suggestions that we have done in the past in that committee. We can work together collectively to bring all of those ideas, what approves
Great.
is receiving approval at committee level.
Great. Well, next Monday, we'll all be in the Christmas spirit, so it'll be a good time to bring it to us. Operating, Councillor Clark.
Well, just when we're on the topic of revenue generating, we received a grant a while back for solar panels. And I'm not sure where we're at with that, but, and I'm not sure where we're at with, we were going to explore the expansion of them, but that's an area where it's either going to be cost savings because you use the solar panels to relieve some of the costs on the arenas or our other assets, or it could end up being a revenue generator. I'm just wondering if we could get an update on that and whether or not it's an area of potential revenue.
Mr. Bray, I think this, or Kevin, on the solar panels on the arena, is this a huge revenue source for us?
Through the mayor to Councillor Clark, earlier this year, we brought a report forward that awarded the installation of those solar panels. And I think I provided a little bit of a cost benefit analysis in there to reduce the operating cost of the arena, which is indirectly reducing the cost for transit because it was a transit grant that received the funding for the solar panels. Beyond looking at implementing that project, I haven't looked into, or my team isn't looking into further solar panels on facilities.
Okay.
So that might be an area of expansion if we know that's still a positive, you know, there used to be more incentive to get into solar panels. I don't know what the incentives are, but if it's a positive thing, then we could look at other assets that could bear the weight of solar panels.
I also would throw into it charging stations as a potential revenue source, but we need to get to the point where we have more anyway. So this sounds like something else council can look at. I love it. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. I have a few questions for our police chief, if he doesn't mind coming up.
Okay, we'll start with the
I have
police
reached out to him and had a brief discussion with him, but I think he'll be able to expand on it for everybody here tonight. So thanks, Mark. I've expected this budget for the last couple of years because our city's growing. Your frontline officers need a lot more support than what they have, and this just fits right in. Your downtown special constables couldn't be better. I bet those merchants are jumping up and down to see they're going to have more help down there with our issues that are happening downtown. So my first question was on page 11. You talk about revenue outstanding and yet to be received, and also on page 12, you talk about total new grant revenue expected in 2025. How does that work into your budget? I mean, do you assume you're going to get that and then put your budget in, or is that something that you're hoping you'll get, or you know you're going to get? That's my first question.
All right. Well, good evening, to your worship, to Councillor Herbert. We are expecting about $937,000. That much has been confirmed. We expect upwards of 2.9 million in the last week. In the last 2 weeks, we've had the NG 911 grant in the amount of 1.4 million confirmed. So our unconfirmed amounts are reducing. And I can tell you we're out probably 500,000 is unconfirmed at this point, but submitted. Every year we submit to grants. And as you know, we've been very successful in writing grants and obtaining grants. We, throughout the province, we have had an advantage in that area in our police service. What I can tell you is there are some recurring grants that we expect that expire March 31st, but we expect them to be re-announced and for us to win those grants again. They're competitive grants. There are a number of other fail-safe mechanisms that we have in place when we build our budget. Things like resignations or retirements, they will happen. And there's ways that we can account for any unconfirmed or grant money that doesn't come through. But anything that we put in this budget, we expect it to come through. In the last week, there were 2 new grants, the CCTV grant and another grant that have come through. There'll be a number of other grants that will come through as well, that if we don't get these, we're highly likely to get other new grants that are coming out.
So you're not concerned?
I'm not.
No, but thank you. Second question under staffing. I notice you are asking for another training officer, the role. Could you expand on that for me, please?
Sure, I can. So the new Community Safety and Policing Act, which came into effect April 1st, 2024, put a number of pressures on all police services in the province of Ontario. One of those is in training and equipment and meeting the standards. And the training standard is to have police officers and special constables in the classroom for X amount of hours to meet certain standards. And the requirements have increased tremendously. So we have one training officer currently. It's just not feasible for Constable Congdon to deal with that all alone. We're going to introduce a second training officer to assist with those pressures.
Well, that's good. Thank you. Those were actually my 2 questions that I had, the grants, assuming you're going to get it, and of course, the extra training officers. Well, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's stay on police. Councillor Wookie, are you on police? No? Any other question for the chief while he's at the podium? Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the pre-briefing too, Chief. It was great to have. And I'm supportive, because I think you laid out a good case that, you know, some of your predecessors, you know, tried to be part of, you know, keeping the taxes or the tax increases low, but it's coming back to bite us now. But to hire 12 new officers is, it's not just going to happen in one fell swoop. A lot of it's going to be dependent on getting positions at the college. So do you think, are we going to see the full impact of all these new hires in this budget, or is it going to be sort of staggered through the year that you might not be expending everything that you're going to need in this request?
Sure. So the budget includes 7 new police officers, and those police officers are staggered throughout the year. Salaries, the budget has been planned and designed for 2 in January, 3 in the summer, 2 in the fall. And the other 5 civilians that are support staff that are required in a growing community and a growing police service with the demands that we're facing. Those civilians will come in staggered as well. We will realize and actualize those hires in the year. We have done a very good job with a very strong administrative team that actions hires very quickly. If there's a resignation, there's a hire within 8 weeks. We're already working behind the scenes on preparing ourselves for this potential approval of this budget, and people are pooled and ready to go at a time of our choosing. So yes, recruitment is always, that's one of the big pressures of this budget. The attraction of talent, the retention of talent, and the wellness of the staff that we have to keep them here. Is recruitment a challenge throughout the province of Ontario for policing? I'd say it is North American wide. And trying to find the best talent, the best candidate that is reflective of our community. In all regards, it's not easy, but we have a good team, a strong team, and we have new ways, innovative ways to attract talent. So I think we'll action all these hires in 25.
Further question of police. I'm just going to kind of take this as we get a question, but then cover that topic off and wait for others. I see no other hands. So Chief, thank you for your coming here and sharing with us tonight. Councillor Wookie, we'll go to your hand next and go to operating under whatever you're asking about.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have kind of a mixed menu of comments here and then a few questions. First of all, for the general public watching this, I say this privately to my colleagues, but I appreciate every year that we don't get into like talking about photocopy budgets in the clerk's office and things like that. Like I deeply appreciate that we are professional and we prioritize operations and we trust our leaders to bring things to us that are reasonable. So first of all, thanks to my colleagues. Secondly, the public would notice that there are quite a few staffing increases this year. And that's just one of those things that I'm comfortable with because it's simply that ebb and flow of things in a sense of we're growing. And of course, the whole city's growing at the same time and demands on city services are growing at the same time. So you're going to get these times where you have to hire a considerable number of people in one budget cycle, and that happens to be this cycle. And so I'm comfortable with that, and I want to tell the staff that I support that. I've got 2 really, light questions, and the first one's for Mr. Pompilli regarding our situation with revenue within the planning department and the situation with our neighbors, our neighbor around us, and just a little bit of commentary on that situation. Then I just have my perennial question about trails and trail lighting for Mr. Bray. Thank you.
Okay. I want to start with Mr. Pompilli on working with our neighbors on planning.
Yep. Through your worship to Councillor Wookie's question. No, thank you for that. In this year's budget, I have included some modest revenues from with regards to the CEPO office. There's been some continued dialogue with Central Elgin. No decisions have been med. I do plan to report, because it's a contractual issue. I do plan on bringing a report forward to council. I was hoping I was able to do it tonight, but it'll likely be next week. That'll outline what the options are for that. But in this budget, I did provide a modest revenue source, less than half of what we normally would get from that revenue source. So that's all I can report on that, but discussions have been positive, and I'll be able to update council at a future meeting. I think, was that the only part of the revenues?
Yep, that's it. The next question was for Mr. Bray on trails, the additions to trails and lighting of trails.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Are you referring to phase 2 of the lighting on the Whistle Stop Trail, Councillor?
Yes, specifically on that lighting, and then just in general, so you can talk to us and the public, just in general about what's happening with trail development in 2025. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. We had budget last year to increase the lighting to the rest of the trail. We had to do some investigative work because there's tree canopy there. So of course, we're using solar lighting. We wanted to find the appropriate product that would, when trees are in leaf, that would still gather enough energy to illuminate through the night. So we got the pricing in. It was over budget, wanting to stay within budget. We've asked the proponent to come back and fine tune it. They have, and they want to do the install next month. And we'll be putting the footings in independently of that. As you know, we don't need special footings for these. We don't need the conduit because they're solar. So that'll be happening probably early January, and then the lights will be installed shortly after that. As for trail increase, I apologize. I can look at my book. If you want to wait a second, I can discuss what we're doing. I just can't recall the trails we're doing under next year's program.
That'd be great if you could. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Bray is looking up. Is there anyone else willing to go on operating? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the area of human resources, our costs are going way up with regard to WSIB for a number of departments. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that's being built into each of the those departments, fire, police, to help those employees because we can't always find modified work, and we know the complexity of the jobs is growing and the pressures are growing each year. And so from a human resources point, we worry about the people, and then from the other side of it, we have to pay for those costs, and how do we pay for those? So I'm just wondering if any of the chiefs or the human rights resources folks have any commentary.
Sandra, Chief,
Through your worship to Councillor Clark, we try to work through these. We're working on some committees and some critical incident stress people within our department. But the nature is you don't know what's going to happen in our line of work. And we could go for a long period of time without any accidents or injuries. And the little injuries, I shouldn't say little injuries, but the injuries that we can have modified duty. The deputy and I have been working with HR department to have some modified duties, bringing them back, being incident safety officers, where they're not hands-on, doing some other stuff, working with fire prevention, working with the training. But some of the ones that are the long-term ones that are created through PTSD that we can't, set a time frame on. We're just working with HR and trying to figure out how WSIB looks at this and where we go from there. But we try to get some stuff in place. We have some teams set up. We try to do debriefing. We do a debriefing every morning. When you finish your shift and the next crew is coming on, you do that little talk. So that little talk is basically a debriefing every morning. So we try to do those things, and we try to meet with the crews, and we follow up when there's when there's an incident that's a tragic incident, we try to get to those people right away and have those conversations, but we're not clinicians in that area. So, you know, what happens beyond that is kind of out of our control, but we try to work with them with our association also and administration and through our friends in HR to, you know, mitigate and alleviate those incidents.
Chief Roskamp, do you want to add? I know we've had some significant improvement at the police services on the dealing with WSIB and how it used to be a colossal and it's now a manageable situation.
We have, Councillor Clark, this is an area, and I'm glad you asked this question. The extraordinary work that our men and women are doing every day is something to be very proud of. We have taken this on in ways to try to prevent with some preventative wellness navigation. We brought in a doctor that is meeting with all of our officers. It's a mandatory session that I have directed that all of them will sit in a group setting, sworn and civilians. And that took place this fall with all sworn. Next spring, all civilians will sit with this doctor in a group setting, and this doctor comes highly qualified and is published as a University of Western professor. That's one aspect of the wellness navigation that we're working on. In addition to what Chief Gregory said about operational debriefs, those are extremely important there's a new rethink, there's a reimagining of how we have to address these matters when they happen. These officers are asked by us to go to these calls. They attend, and there's some trauma that they're seeing, and there's some trauma that they're internalizing. And as soon as they get back to the station after that call, we're having crisis workers on scene, on site, which we already have with regards to the CMHA workers, but we've stepped it up with psychotherapists on call that we will call in immediately to meet those officers that are out at those scenes, those matters that I report out on through our corporate communications for the community that are the tragedies that happen, unfortunately. And so in addition to the wellness navigation that's occurring pre the incident, we offer employee assistance programs through Homeward, which offers a whole host of preventative maintenance and care programs. We also have what's called a safeguard maintenance program for certain positions and roles that we know will the individual in the role will experience trauma, whether it be from a forensic identification role to a forensic computer analyst role that are looking at devices and computers. They all are subject mandatory one-on-one with a doctor yearly. And I get a report back whether they can remain in the position or we need to proceed with caution or they need to come out of the role. So I'm just touching the tip of where we've been going with the support of Police Services Board. And our people deserve it. I can tell you, and I'll leave you with this, we were 3 years ago with 8 members off on WSIB. We're down to 1. So that, to me, that's a message that we must be doing something right. The investments we're making must be working. Now, just like the chief said, one incident tonight could change that. But we think we have the right pieces in place to support and to assist those that are currently at work, those that are off. We follow those files very carefully to make sure they get everything they need so that they can return healthy and be contributing members of the police service and in their personal lives to live healthy.
Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Well, that's great news because that was my worry is that in this day and age, we can't be reactive. We need to be proactive. And it sounds like both departments are doing an excellent job on that and taking care of their people. So well done.
Further questions on the operating budget? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll start with, well, because I'm at the page right now with Heather. Heather, the commitment that we are about to make to the inn. What are your visioning glasses say that, is this just a start of what we're going to see increase as their fundraising efforts may be challenged, programs may be cut? Like, you know, this is a 0.5% increase, more than a 0.5% increase in the global budget just to the inn, which we were told in the beginning, we built the building for them and we thought that was the extent of it. Where are we going with this? And just curious to hear your thoughts.
Thank you for your question. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Peters. I would say that we are committed to ending homelessness in St. Thomas. We all know that. And in my opinion, it will be, with what we're doing right now, I would say in 3 years, we're going to be in a completely different position. We meet regularly with the Inn, Indwell, the YWCA, to try to look at what the next steps are. And we do have a really good plan that will see this come to fruition. And at 3 years is sort of what I'm looking at. So when we said 400,000, it was an up to 400,000. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to be required in each year. As these new builds come on, we're going to see a reduction. That reduction is going to be a reduction in costs for food and for different items that are needed within the inn. And then when we get to the end, like we've always said, we want to change the inn into supportive housing. And that's still in the vision.
I want to go to land ambulance. Land ambulance, we're looking at a 0.1% increase year over year. How is that even possible? Like, is land ambulance going to end up being a health unit that all of a sudden we're going to see some substantive increase come mid-year? I just can't believe that land ambulance services are only going up 0.1%.
Mr. Treasurer? Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. The county obviously runs that program, and I haven't had any in-depth conversations with the county about it.
This is a number that the county has given us then?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, well, let's hope for the best on that one. Okay. My last one is to Jeff Bray. I noticed scattered throughout your budget, and I didn't have the time to start to add up all the lines, but how much are we spending a year cleaning up graffiti and vandalism? It just seems like every budget, doesn't matter where it is, there's a line item for graffiti and vandalism. And get any idea how much we're spending?
Not through you, Councillor, or Mayor Preston, I'm sorry, not off the top of my head, but it's one of those at need, and we try to respond within 24 hours. I can get that number for you. Okay. Sorry.
I should have given you the heads up on that one, but it just struck me that they're scattered through the budget.
Right.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Clark?
Matt just let me know it was 20,000 last year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark?
Thanks. A question for Sandra Schultz on retiree benefits. They're going up 40.5%. And I'm just wondering if that's both numbers and what the commentary is there on why it's so high.
Through through Mayor Preston to Councillor Clark, that is actually just the renewal numbers coming in. So the renewal itself was based over the last 3 years, and that's utilization for retirees. Also, we have had an increase of retirees. So it's both the number of enrollees as well as the cost.
I'd like to quit making everybody run up and do one question. So next, let's try and see if we can stay on one of the departments and then go to another if that's the case. If not, we'll just call it the exercise program and it'll work for us. Okay, Operating Budget Council. Councillor Kohler.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just especially since we're looking at maybe doing that with the reserves, I just want to kind of highlight, I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of the items that I was looking at where I think there's going to be some surplus, and the roads and transportation is one that I always look at, but we're currently sitting for 2025 looking at 3.1 million, and year to date we're at 2.5, right? So I don't know in the next 2 months if we're going to expend all that, but last winter was pretty mild, and we're in early December and we've only had like one incident in there. But for the and then even looking at some of the simple things like some of the hydro budgets that we're looking at right now, where I think you're going to see probably some surplus in there. Valley View, just for one, they've actually reduced theirs for 2025 to 195,000, but we currently sit at year to date at 103. And then the Joe and different things like that. So just so people don't think that, oh, I'm just saying that there's going to be surplus, but there's items that we look at. And I don't see anybody from the industrial development team, but I don't know if there's just late, Sean's here, but I don't know if there's just late billings coming in, but either they're doing a really good job or there's a lot of late bills coming in after. But contract services, we're looking at $297,000, but year to date, we've only expended 13,000. And then even legal fees, we're looking at 175, and then we're only at 69,000. So hopefully it's because we're doing a good job and we don't require that and we're putting that in, and we'll see those surpluses come to fruition.
Super. Other council on operating budgets? I'm telling you, these guys did a pretty good job of putting their budgets together and being as lean and as mean as we can be. So I'm pretty pleased with what we're hearing where we're looking. But I as Councillor Wookie said at the beginning, I really didn't want any questions on $5.85, because that isn't what the council's job is. It's to look at the department as a whole and say it's growing, it's doing what it needs to do. So if I have no other questions at operating, perhaps I could summarize where we're at. I see nobody going at us. Okay, well then I can take the operating section as it is, and there was a few questions asked where some will come back to us, but there wasn't, I don't think, any question asked that had substantial amounts of funding attached to it. So I think we can live with the operating side. I summarized the capital expenditure side on a use of infrastructure reserve, and we needed to answer one more question on the fire department radio thing. So if it's okay with council, for the last 2 years, about now in the evening, the city manager jumped in and said, okay, let me take this back and work with the treasurer for the next few days, and we'll come back Monday night with where we think we are as a final. If I can summarize though, I think the numbers we're looking at are somewhere around 3.8 to 3.9%. Is there anybody who disagrees with what we said? Okay, well then I'll take it upon the mayor's self to spend some time with the treasurer over the next part of this week. Next Monday night, we'll verify that number through looking at the BEARCOM and also the reserve fund. And if I hear nothing else from council or from anyone else in the middle of that, next Monday night we'll announce a number we think somewhere in that neighborhood. Are we okay with what I've just said? Great. Madam Clerk, is there anything we have to do at this point
This
We don't
time.
really vote on it, do we? So,
No, your worship, it's to assist the Treasury Department so that it can establish the budget for the January 2025 or January 13th meeting.
right, so we've got some time in there to finish this. And then get to the street with some great requests for proposals on some great projects coming next year. I'd like to really thank the treasurer and his department for the heavy work on this, right? And we know who really to thank in the work. Right, okay. Because putting this together and then going back and coming again, going back and coming again, and then it's been quite unique in the last couple of weeks with kind of a fill-in city manager situation, how much conversation I've had with people where it's not their department they're even talking about, but with knowing from the leadership team that what they've heard from other department heads as to how well they've worked, it's been great. I want to thank council for very respectful and move forward on budget night. I think we're doing the citizens of St. Thomas a great piece. We're doing our department's growth potential and the ability to move forward on the growth of this city. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight to do that. And you have any questions, please go to your favorite department head and ask them. And if not, we'll come back with a final number for you next Monday night. Madam Clerk.
Your worship, at this time, I have a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed or carried? Thank you.